All righty, we got a lot going on in the city of Providence, and the new city council president is here.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, I think you probably have power if you're watching this show, right? I think it's a crazy time. I think most of us are perplexed over the idea that we've been on the planet for a while. It's 2018, and it seems and it feels like we lose power more now than we ever did. And while our technology in so many ways is growing and our feasibility and capability is exceeding all of our dreams and expectations, our power goes out, it feels like, and we need to do a study on this, right? Another study. It feels like our power goes out more now than it used to. And part of it may be the weather conditions and the science of global warming and more turbulent storms. Part of it may be the deterioration of our infrastructure, but it just doesn't seem right to most of us that we experience this like this. And we have a forecast for Wednesday to be turbulent, and we're all sitting here going, you know, we'll be able to turn the lights on. And I don't think it's any way to live, and I just don't know what the answer is. But over the next week or two, we'll try to schedule some folks in here to talk to. I'm not just talking about National Grid and spokesperson response. That's all due respect, garbage. All due respect to the company. They're just going to tell us what they want us to hear. Someone's got to be able to tell me what is going on with the whole situation. So if you have an idea, let us know, either here or on the radio show. Great to have you in. The president of the City Council in Providence is my guest. I just wanted to make a note that the president's wheels are loose again this morning. This tweet just came over minutes before we were going to do the show, and he writes, "Why did the Obama administration start an investigation into the Trump campaign with zero proof of wrongdoing long before the election in November? Wanted to discredit so crooked Hillary would win? Unprecedented, bigger than Watergate. Plus, Obama did nothing about Russian meddling." Okay, all that theory aside from His Honor, how can he accuse the Obama administration of doing nothing about Russian meddling that he says doesn't exist? Just smoke that one for a minute, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Tariffs and gosh knows what. All right, we have a brand new city councilor headline here, and let's just get into it with David Salvatore. He is a welcome guest. We've got lots of things on the agenda, and let's start with what is the nation's conversation, and that is weapons, guns, all of that. Mr. President, welcome. Nice to have you.
Thank you, Dan.
You got power?
We do.
Before we get to the gun thing, you have any thought on my opening wondering about things?
Yeah, I was having this conversation earlier today. We didn't lose power where I live, but there were several abutting streets in my neighborhood that didn't lose power, and power wasn't restored until yesterday. So they're out of power for 48
hours. My producer Lexi, as we record the program early this afternoon, she's still out.
Yeah, and where I
got to invite her and her mom up to the house tonight, so they got somewhere to stay. It's just crazy.
So where I reside in Elmhurst, the majority of the homes were developed during the 20s and 30s. So there wasn't a lapse or a gap in development in the neighborhood. So I'm a little perplexed why several streets in my neighborhood lost power and wasn't restored for 48 hours. But my street, which is a main thoroughfare, it's Academy Avenue, we didn't lose power. So the mayor and I had a brief conversation on Saturday. We're going to have a conversation with National Grid and find out what's going on and inform folks moving forward. This is what they can expect.
Right.
I'm just as perplexed.
What questions do you ask? Reaganberg, the state rep, Lieutenant Governor candidate, put out a press release. I saw it on my phone earlier today. He's calling for an oversight investigation of National Grid. Look, I don't mind that. I mean, the more questions, the merrier, sure, I guess. But it just feels like we don't have anywhere to go other than to the, and I don't mean this way, but the culprit, so to speak. And it's probably a very unfair term, and I'm not trying to suggest the National Grid is a bad actor. But getting the answers from the player who's perceived to be underperforming doesn't seem to be the way we go about this. And I just don't know how to figure it out.
Well, getting answers first and then providing solutions moving forward and how we address this. Unfortunately, National Grid is a private company, so the city of Providence
regulated though.
Regulated, yes,
but
constituents call us as council people.
Too big to. I mean, they're our only shop.
That's right.
Yeah, they own the poles. It's crazy.
It is.
It's frustrating.
And to your point earlier, it's 2018.
Right.
How are we losing power for 72 hours? And us as elected officials cannot get answers as to why.
Is it time for a 20-year underground project here to just be able, to cut the cord and say, all right, enough of this garbage, no more power lines, everything goes underneath. I mean, cable went underneath. Yeah, we dug up neighborhoods all over Kingdom Come to watch TV. I don't know.
Well, as you know, there's a price tag to do that.
Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
There's also a price tag every time you have to empty the refrigerator and the freezer because you just lost everything in it again.
Fair enough.
All right. Guns. You were suggesting last week, post Parkland, Florida, that you'd like to see the city of Providence have its own sovereignty with gun laws. Tell me.
So there is preemption legislation or a statute on the Rhode Island general laws that prohibit cities and towns from regulating firearms. I have been extremely outspoken regarding firearms, not only here in Providence, but throughout the state, throughout the country. I want to take a proactive approach to addressing gun violence. I don't want to see something happen in one of our schools in Providence. I don't want us to be a national story, and I'm not suggesting that there are deficiencies in terms of our public safety plan within our public school buildings.
Of course there are. Your school buildings are decrepit. I mean, in a different kind of safety issue.
Sure.
But I mean, you're already behind the 8 ball in the city.
But again, I think we have a responsibility to take a proactive look at how we keep our residents, especially our young people, safe.
So you're probably one of the most articulate elected officials I get in here, but I want to make sure that you're not just flowery with this concept.
Sure.
What specifically do you want to do, and what will set the city of Providence aside, and what do you think legislation can do to preempt that would happen in Parkland, Florida?
First of all, I don't want assault weapons in the city of Providence.
Period.
Period.
Owned by anybody.
Owned by anybody. They are weapons of war. They don't belong on our streets, and I will not speak for the other cities and towns throughout Rhode Island, but the majority of folks who I speak to in Providence do not want them either.
All right, so you're differentiating between assault weapons and semi-automatic weapons, correct?
Yes.
All right, so what steps do you think you want to take, and what kind of grandfather would be involved in that? You're going to go get those guns? I mean, do you have any idea how many assault weapons exist in the city of Providence right now?
That's a fair question. If you speak with folks at the Providence Police Department, they're taking guns off of the street every single day, illegal guns, guns that aren't traceable. So that's another piece of the problem.
What about legally purchased weapons?
Legally purchased weapons, but we can't identify the folks who did own them. So there needs to be some responsibility on the part of the gun owner.
No, I understand. Listen, whatever the Providence Police are taking off the streets is part of the ongoing, running uphill against the tide type of problem that they have. But if you want to rid the city of assault weapons, period, what are you going to do with the legally purchased and acquired and owned assault weapons now that I'm sure exist in the city by hundreds, if not thousands?
Yeah. And we'll have to take a look at what other cities and towns are doing. I know Denver has banned assault weapons in their city. So there is legislation that has been passed in other cities and towns and states across the country.
Did everybody have like 30 days to give up their guns? What happens?
That's something that we would have to take a look at, work with our city solicitor's office, and see what works best for Providence.
What is your instinct about the legislature's compliance with the city of Providence having its own unique gun laws?
I think it's an uphill battle. I do. I think there are some very powerful lobbyists throughout the country who will fight me and my colleagues on this, but it's extremely important for me as a legislator in the state's capital city to send a message that we are serious about this, and I'm not going to give up until we rid the streets of a lot of these so-called
I got to tell you,
weapons
sometimes
of war.
I can't figure out if I'm in Johnston or Providence, North Providence or Providence. I mean, we're 50 miles long, 35 miles wide. City borders are not, there's no big walls.
Yeah. If the federal government isn't going to do it, if the state of Rhode Island isn't going to do it, then the city of Providence will.
You just trying to grab a headline? Or you think this is a constructive project?
I think it's a constructive project. I recognize that it is an uphill battle. This is not a headline. I think I've been pretty outspoken on on guns in the past. If I wasn't compassionate and serious about this, I wouldn't have asked the legislature or several sponsors to introduce the bill at the State House. I'm happy to have this conversation with members of the General Assembly.
Where does it sit on the priorities for you as you're looking at the entire task that the legislative branch of Providence government has? I mean, is it way up top, or does it sit, as the news cycle starts to fade away, somewhere in the middle?
It's public safety. So public safety is one of those 4 or 5 pillars of local government that people expect from us. And unfortunately, we're at a state now where, we're addressing gun violence on a nationwide level in a way that we haven't had to deal with it in the past.
All right. Well, we'll follow that one closely. There's a bunch of other stuff going on, certainly. We'll be right back with the City Council President. All right, so there's the former chair of the Providence Democratic Committee, Mr. Ward, who got into a little bit of a situation. And there you see that little, oh, there it is. Yeah, there's the little meme, new term we all have to understand in the social media world, the meme that he put out. I guess his wife, who was the interim city council president, thought she was going to win the gig. You had did you pull some palace coup in order to be able to achieve the city council presidency and upset the Democratic apple cart? Is that what happened? Come on.
No, look,
it's politics.
It's politics.
Competitive.
It's competitive, but more importantly, the majority of my colleagues on the council wanted to see us, the council, from a legislative perspective, move in a different direction. I can say over the last couple of months, folks are happy with the direction we're moving in. We're getting folks more involved in the legislative process. Issues that they're serious and passionate about. So we're starting to have these public conversations. That is not directed at my predecessor, who I have a lot of respect for. Again, just the majority of the council wanted to see us move in a different direction.
You put out a release on this guy. So he puts out this meme, and it's Fredo and Michael. It's the movie, and you and who's the other guy? Who's the other guy in the who's the other guy?
Councilman Igliozzi.
Igliozzi. So you and Igliozzi, your right hand man, you all put out these. It's like, come on, man. Don't you? In retrospect, I mean, the guy's out. You forced him out. I think he's got enough issues going on with the governor and some of this Democratic money that's moving through the Democratic committee, and there's a lot of stuff out there that is fluid right now in state politics. Did you overreact, jumping ugly with this guy more or less calling for him to go?
So,
I mean,
we did
the Italian thing. Listen, I'm not Italian, but it's not like but come on. People
to our point
tweet,
earlier,
they do stupid things, and nobody gets a second chance when they do stupid things.
It was unprofessional, and I think we can all agree that we expect more from our elected officials. Keep in mind that position, these ward committees on the Democratic City Committee, they're elected by the people, by the electorate. So there's something to be said there. All right, we represent the people who put us in office, but we didn't collectively, as a body, put out a press release. One of my colleagues found out about.
Yeah, right. It had happened a month before. I don't know. I'm not going to. We got so much to cover. I agree. I just wonder whether or not, in retrospect, you think perhaps too much was made of the silly little situation. Yes? No?
No, I think, again, we're in 2018. Why should we be taking shots at certain ethnicities? That's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. So whether it's Italian, Latino.
So you thought that was the intent, in part, rather than just, whatever the meme of the day was. You know what? This is an unanswerable question. I'm just going to pass on it. I'm not here to defend the guy. I thought it was completely dopey for him to do it. But
it was unprofessional. And look, as a Democrat in the city of Providence, I don't want someone leading our party.
Well, my criticism in real time was, hey, when you're the party chair, you don't cause turbulence in your party, regardless of the meme with the Fredo and the Michael thing. I mean, the Italian ethnicity end of it for me was secondary to, hey, if you're leading, you're trying to build coalition. You're not trying to fracture the situation, especially when you're battling on your wife's behalf. But having said that, there are bigger fish to fry, like finances. Mayor Lorza was here only a few weeks ago and gave us a long-winded, it's a long cut, as we say in the business. But there's a lot of aspects to the city's financial health. Watch this.
It really ties into the city's fiscal challenges. I mean, it's no surprise that the city has these fiscal issues. We've been doing well, But that's going to evaporate in a second if we don't address our long-term challenges. And I think there's an opportunity to work together. I've been pushing for the past year and change to lease our water supply board, to once and for all fix our pension challenges. If we're able to do that, then we can have maybe $35, $40 million additional in our budget every single year. And then when I'm negotiating with the unions, well then, you know, there are resources there that I can offer in exchange in the negotiation. Right now, we're just scraping by on this rainy day fund that we've put together. That's going to disappear in our second. And I can tell you something, Dan, the city is not going bankrupt under my watch.
Right. Okay, well, got that part. You in favor of selling the assets of the water supply board?
No. My colleagues on the council made it clear last year that we are in opposition to selling the water supply board.
So he keeps floating the idea as if it's a tangible solution. If you can't get the legislature, meaning the council, to do it, it's a non-starter, right?
Well, I think the conversation a year ago was more about selling the water supply board, and the conversation that's being had today is about leasing it with some overarching public authority to regulate it. So right now, our water supply board is regulated by PVD.
So rather than getting a whole bunch of change in a lump sum in the sale of the asset, hundreds of millions of dollars, correct? It would be, or how much is the thing worth?
There are a couple of assessments out there. To lease it, it's not certain if it would be a lump sum or if it would be payments over time.
Well, if you buy, well, listen, everybody understands the difference.
Over.
You buy something, you pay for it. You lease it, you pay it on terms. You'd rather see some kind of steady cash flow on the lease for the what? The access to what entity is going to buy?
It would be a private entity. However, if we're going to explore leasing our water to a private entity, there would have to be an overarching authority to regulate it, in addition to the PUC.
Right.
So right now there's
a lot of
bureaucracy.
bureaucracy.
Understood, but keep in mind, we do have the second best water in the country in terms of quality.
Right.
I don't want to see that go away. And our rates are, I think, competitively low versus some of our peers in the Northeast. So two very determining factors as we make.
What does the water supply board provide in terms of financial input to the city as we speak? What does it? Is there?
It's a separate entity.
It's a separate entity. It's not giving you in the operating funding of the city any money at all, correct? Correct. Yet the city has quasi jurisdiction over it. So if you sell it, it becomes a tangible asset sold, kind of like a backstop of financial security gone. But is it really the place where you ought to be thinking about balancing budget? I'm asking. Lease or sale? I mean, obviously you don't want to sell it. Is leasing it really an answer?
Well, keep in mind, you heard the mayor say that bankruptcy would not happen under his watch. I can tell you that if that were to happen, if the city were ever to fall into bankruptcy, a receiver would make this decision for us.
Where does that leave us?
In terms...
Where does that leave us when you say that? Somebody would make the decision for us. Are you saying that you've got to make a decision on the status of the water supply board now?
I think we do.
Okay.
I think
will that happen in 2018? In this calendar year?
That is up to the General Assembly. I think there are a lot of folks who have to be brought to the table. There are other cities and towns to consider. And you heard the mayor say that he is reaching out. I take him at his word that he is having conversations with the other stakeholders.
All right, when we come back, I think the president and I are going to have a little tangle. These cameras. Stay with us.
Racism of any kind will not be tolerated in our streets.
That's MacLeod from the NCAA. I got the basketball thing on my NAACP, 2 A's in that. She was here discussing this a month ago situation where these pamphlets were dropped in the city. You spoke at that event.
I did.
What do you think the tone of get along is right now in the city of Providence?
I think we can all agree that systemic racism is not going to be tolerated not only in the city of Providence but anywhere. And the fact that we have to continue having these press conferences to deliver this message is, to me, quite frankly, unacceptable.
It's unacceptable, but I think sometimes you build your own problem by, I don't know. It's a catch-22. It's a chicken or the egg. Do you ignore these things and not let them rise to the level of attention, or do you nip it in the bud?
The fact that
they're
it
usually
happens.
one-off ridiculous behavior, and everybody comes running as if it's the end of the world. It's awful, but is it the end of the world?
I'll respectfully disagree with you. It's not silly, and it's not, you know,
No, I didn't say this was silly. It's awful. It's terrible. Somebody puts out a racist flyer. I mean, but they're looking for. They're looking for the day that the press conference comes is the day that they're satisfied that they got everybody's goat. Is my point. You know, so. You know, I always wonder why everybody comes running in these situations as opposed to just, you know, turning the other cheek and trying to figure out whether, you know, if the tree falls in the woods, there's nobody there to hear it, doesn't make any noise.
No, we can use events like this as an opportunity to send a message that we're not going to tolerate this. There is still some pockets of racism in the city. Okay, we see it on social media.
Everywhere.
So the fact that it's happening again in 2018 in our capital city, we have responsibility.
All right, listen, your 2018 technology. How about this headline? You only got a couple of minutes. You're lucky you saved only a couple of minutes here. What the heck? You got red light cameras, and now you got them around the schools, allegedly at 11 miles per hour over the speed limit. And we already have reports where people are getting nailed for 4 miles an hour over the speed limit. And it's not a real violation. It's an internal violation. I did the math on this thing. This thing could be worth $40 or $50 million a year if you put all 15 up around the city, around the schools. What are you, the captain of the Big Brother ship here? Because I know you support this, right? Come on, man.
If there are issues around folks speeding 4 miles per hour over the limit and they're receiving citations, that's something that we need to address.
Yeah, they drag their sorry rear ends into court, go see Judge Caprio, get kicked. I mean, people are working for a living. Don't you have any empathy for the idea that Big Brother needs to just kind of calm down a little bit here?
What I don't have empathy for is folks who continue to break our traffic laws. We lost a teacher in front of Mount Pleasant High School in a crosswalk. This is the biggest complaint that I receive, and I think I can speak for my colleagues, that we receive from our constituents, especially at community meetings. And I would encourage folks from the media, folks from our neighborhoods to come out and listen to our residents. And
you think there's more support for these cameras than there is complaints?
I went on 630 WPRO this morning, and after that interview, I received 5 text messages or phone calls from folks saying, we agree with the program. One person said, I will pay for the camera to be installed in front of my house. And I'll show you the text message.
I don't know if it's the power of the radio or you've got a lot of friends that support you. I'm not sure which.
No, and look, again, this is a quality of life issue. It's the biggest complaint that I know I receive.
Don't tell me it's not a money grab in some way. Come on, yo, $95? Knock it down to 25, I'll start believing it.
I'm open-minded. We'll take a look at it. If there are deficiencies in the program, we'll make the necessary changes, but to say that we're going to eliminate the program would not be responsible on our part.
Come back often. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
City Council Presidents. We'll be right back with a final word. A little break from the news the day tomorrow. We'll take a look at the Credit Union State Basketball Championships for the boys and the girls. It's an annual thing. It's kind of our own bracket show. So we'll have the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, the coaches and the players here tomorrow night to have some fun with that. Of course, we'll be on the radio this weekend on WPRO. Hey, I saw the text. It's true that David showed me the text. He really got it. See?